For 8 months, the 6-year-old boy hadn't spoken a single word. His father, a highly decorated Navy SEAL, built an absolute wall of discipline around them, convinced it was the only way to survive their grief. He pushed everyone away, especially the clinic nurse, Sarah. But then, Sarah found the boy's yellow toy walkie-talkie left on a counter. Everyone thought it was broken, until she heard the static. Through the plastic speaker, she heard the little boy whisper a secret so heartbreaking, it changed everything. The boy wasn't sick. He was staying perfectly silent to protect his dad. And when the hardened SEAL finally found out why, his walls completely shattered. The pediatric clinic was quiet. The afternoon rush had ended, leaving only the low hum of the air conditioning. Nurse Sarah Jenkins closed the last medical chart of the day, rubbing the back of her neck. Then, a sound broke the silence. Static, low, rhythmic, and crackling. It came from the edge of the examination table. A bright yellow toy walkie-talkie sat next to the box of pediatric bandages. Its plastic antenna was bent. It looked completely broken. Sarah turned toward it. Through the hiss of the static, a tiny, fragile voice whispered, "Is Daddy mad at me? Answer me." Sarah froze. The voice belonged to the 6-year-old boy sitting quietly on the edge of the table. Leo. He was holding the other half of the yellow toy in his small hands, staring firmly at the linoleum floor. Movement in the doorway caught Sarah's attention. Captain Liam Carter stood in the frame. He was still in his Navy working uniform. His posture was rigid. He possessed the kind of disciplined stillness built from years in special warfare, but his face told a completely different story. His jaw was clenched tight. His breathing had stopped. His eyes were locked on his son, wide and entirely shattered. Sarah glanced down at Leo's chart on the counter. In the top corner, a bold red note stood out. Patient has not spoken a single word in 8 months, not since his mother's funeral. For a split second, Sarah saw the powerful SEAL crumble. She saw a father drowning in an ocean of grief he couldn't figure out how to navigate. But the moment didn't last. Liam blinked, and the steel wall slammed back into place. His expression went blank. He stepped into the room with heavy, deliberate strides. He didn't ask what Leo had said. He didn't ask Sarah if she had heard it. He simply reached out, snatched the broken yellow radio from the counter, and shoved it into his cargo pocket. "We are done here, Nurse Jenkins," Liam said. His voice was flat, carrying no emotion at all. He lifted Leo off the table, holding the boy securely against his chest. Leo didn't look up. He just wrapped his small arms around his father's neck, retreating back into his fortress of absolute silence. Liam turned and walked out the door, leaving Sarah alone in the quiet clinic. She stared at the empty space where the toy had been. She knew professional boundaries. She knew she wasn't supposed to get involved, but she also knew exactly what it looked like when a man was terrified of his own child's pain. Sarah pulled into the driveway of the suburban house 2 days later. The address was listed on her home care rotation sheet. It was a scheduled pediatric follow-up and home environment evaluation for Leo Carter. The house looked perfectly normal from the outside, but the moment Liam opened the front door, Sarah felt the emotional temperature drop. "Nurse Jenkins," Liam said. He stood in the doorway, blocking her path for a fraction of a second before stepping aside. He wore civilian clothes today, a dark t-shirt and jeans, but he still moved like a man on active duty. "Captain Carter," Sarah replied, keeping her voice even. "I'm here for Leo's scheduled evaluation." Liam gave a tight nod. "He's in the living room." Sarah stepped inside. Over her career, she had visited dozens of homes. Usually, houses with 6-year-old boys were chaotic. There would be shoes kicked off in the hallway, fingerprints on the walls, and a colorful mess of plastic toys scattered across the rug. This house had none of that. It was spotless. The hardwood floors were aggressively clean. The throw pillows on the dark couch were aligned with mathematical precision. It didn't feel like a family home. It felt like a barracks. Every surface was stripped bare of personal warmth. There were no finger-painted pictures taped to the refrigerator, no scattered crayons. There was exactly one framed photograph on the mantel. Liam in his dress blues, holding a much younger Leo. There were no pictures of Leo's mother. The grief in this house wasn't messy. It was sterile. And somehow, that made it infinitely heavier. It was the house of a man trying desperately to maintain absolute control over an unpredictable world. Leo was sitting on the edge of a large leather chair. His posture was painfully straight, mirroring his father's rigid stance. His hands rested flat on his knees. Peeking out from the pocket of his small denim jacket was the bright yellow plastic antenna of the Broken Walkie-Talkie. Liam crossed his arms, watching Sarah's every move. His physicals are up to date. I measure his weight and temperature daily. His caloric intake is standard. Everything is logged on the kitchen counter for your review. He was trying to do her job for her. He wanted this to be a tactical briefing, not an emotional evaluation. He wanted her in and out. "Thank you, Captain," Sarah said softly, setting her medical bag down on the floor. "But I'm not just here to check his temperature." Sarah lowered herself to the floor. She didn't stand over the boy with her clipboard. Instead, she sat cross-legged on the cold hardwood, bringing herself intentionally below his eye level. Liam shifted his weight near the hallway arch. His arms were still crossed over his chest. He was watching her with the intense, calculating focus of a man assessing a potential threat. "Hi, Leo," Sarah said softly. She didn't ask how he was doing. She didn't ask him to say hello back. Children who had retreated into silence were used to adults demanding words from them. Sarah wasn't going to demand anything. She opened her medical bag with slow, deliberate movements. "I'm just going to listen to your heart. It won't hurt, and I'll be quick." Leo didn't nod, but he didn't pull away either. Sarah warmed the stethoscope with her hand before placing it gently against his chest. His heartbeat was steady, but slightly elevated. It was the rapid rhythm of a child who spent all his energy observing the adults around him, waiting for the next emotional storm. While she listened, she kept her eyes soft. Leo's gaze dropped downward, landing on the pocket of his small denim jacket. The bent yellow antenna of the walkie-talkie poked out just a fraction of an inch. Across the room, Liam's phone buzzed loudly on the kitchen island. The sudden noise made the captain step away, turning his back for exactly 3 seconds to check the screen. In those 3 seconds, Leo's small hand crept up. He pulled the broken radio halfway out of his pocket, holding it against his stomach like a shield. He looked directly at Sarah, his dark eyes scanning her face for any sign of judgment or pity. Sarah didn't reach for the toy. She didn't call out to his father. She simply offered Leo a warm, quiet smile. She tapped her own chest, right over her heart, and gave him a slow nod. Leo's rigid shoulders dropped. It was just a fraction of an inch, but the tension left his tiny frame. He slipped the radio back into his pocket a second before his father turned around. It was a nearly invisible exchange. But for a boy who had built an absolute wall of silence around himself, it was a profound invitation. Sarah stood up, coiling her stethoscope and slipping it back into her black medical bag. "His vitals are perfectly normal, Captain," she said, keeping her voice calm and steady. "His lungs are clear, and his heart rate is settling." Liam nodded once, his expression unreadable. "Good. Write it in the log on the counter. We keep strict records." "I will," Sarah said. She stood her ground, deciding to push the professional boundary just a fraction of an inch. "But Captain Carter, healing isn't just about physical metrics. Leo's silence is a profound stress response. He's carrying a very heavy emotional load for a 6-year-old. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Liam took a slow, deliberate step forward. The quiet, watchful father instantly vanished, replaced by a hardened military officer. "Nurse Jenkins," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Your agency was contracted to monitor his physical health, not to psychoanalyze my son." "I'm not analyzing him," Sarah replied, refusing to be intimidated. "I am observing him. Children process grief differently than adults do. Sometimes, enforcing strict, silent routines makes them feel trapped, not safe." Liam's eyes flared. For a split second, Sarah saw the crushing weight of his guilt, right before he buried it under anger. "Routine is what keeps us moving forward," Liam said firmly. "He has shelter, he has nutrition, and he has me. The world doesn't stop because you're hurting. He just needs time to understand that." "Time doesn't heal things if you don't allow them to be felt," she said softly. "We don't need to feel it out loud," Liam snapped. The sharpness of his tone echoed off the bare, sterile walls of the living room. On the leather chair, Leo flinched. His small hand immediately clamped over his denim pocket, hiding the broken yellow radio. Liam saw the flinch. A heavy wave of regret washed over his weathered features, but he clearly had no idea how to undo the emotional damage he had just caused. Instead of apologizing, He tightened his jaw and turned away from both of them. "Just sign the log, nurse," Liam said to the wall, "and let me know when you are leaving." He was building a fortress, and he was determined to lock himself and his son inside it. The tense silence in the living room was shattered by a piercing sound from outside. It was a fire engine siren, loud and aggressively close, wailing as it sped down the suburban street. To an adult, it was just neighborhood noise. To a child whose nervous system was already pulled tight, it was an explosion. Leo gasped. His hands flew up to cover his ears, dropping the yellow walkie-talkie onto the cushion. He curled into a tight ball on the leather chair, his small chest heaving with rapid, shallow breaths. Liam reacted instantly. But he reacted like a commanding officer in a crisis, not a father comforting a child. He stepped quickly to the chair, towering over the boy. "Leo!" "Look at me," Liam ordered, his voice sharp and loud over the fading siren. "It's just a truck. You are safe. Regulate your breathing. Look at me." Leo didn't look up. He squeezed his eyes shut, shaking violently, gasping for air that wouldn't reach his lungs. "Leo, stop," Liam said. Panic began to bleed into the captain's authoritative tone. He reached out to pull his son's hands away from his ears. "I need you to calm down." "Captain, stop," Sarah said. She didn't yell, but the absolute certainty in her voice made Liam freeze. Sarah stepped between the massive seal and the trembling child. "You are giving him orders," she said softly. "He doesn't need an officer right now. He needs his dad." Liam stared at her, his chest rising and falling heavily. The anger in his eyes was gone, replaced entirely by a terrifying helplessness. "Get on the floor," Sarah instructed gently, below his eye level. "Don't tell him to stop crying. Just let him know you are here." Liam swallowed hard. The rigid posture of the military man finally broke. He dropped heavily to his knees on the hardwood floor. Following Sarah's quiet gesture, Liam slowly reached out and wrapped his large arms around his son. He pulled Leo off the chair and pressed the boy against his chest. He didn't say a word. He just held him, rocking slightly, letting his own deep, steady heartbeat serve as an anchor. It took 2 minutes. Slowly, the frantic shaking stopped. Leo's breathing hitched, then matched the slow rhythm of his father's chest. The boy buried his face into Liam's shoulder, his small fingers gripping the fabric of his shirt like a lifeline. Liam closed his eyes. He rested his chin on the top of his son's head. When he finally looked up at Sarah, the defensive wall was completely gone. In its place was raw, unshielded gratitude. For the first time, he saw her not as an intruder, but as a lifeline. Before either of them could speak, the heavy wooden front door swung open without a knock. A woman in her early 60s stepped into the foyer. She wore a tailored wool coat, her posture stiff, her eyes instantly sweeping the room. This was Eleanor, Liam's mother-in-law. She stopped in her tracks, taking in the scene. The decorated Navy SEAL was on his knees on the hardwood floor, holding a crying child, with a clinic nurse standing nearby. Instead of showing concern, Eleanor's face hardened into absolute judgment. "Liam," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "What on earth is happening here?" Liam stiffened. The rare vulnerability that had just appeared in his eyes vanished entirely. The heavy, impenetrable shield slammed back down. He stood up slowly, lifting Leo with him, and placed the boy gently back onto the leather chair. Leo got spooked by a siren. "Eleanor," Liam said, his tone perfectly flat. "It's handled." "Handled?" Eleanor stepped further into the sterile living room, ignoring Sarah completely. "He is trembling like a leaf. And look at this place. It's freezing in here. It feels like a hospital waiting room." Liam's jaw tightened. "It's clean." "It's empty, Liam," she fired back. Her voice trembled with the weight of her own unresolved grief. "Just like you've been ever since my daughter died. You think keeping him on a strict military schedule is going to fix him? He hasn't spoken a single word in 8 months. He is slipping away, and your discipline is only making it worse." Sarah stood silently near her medical bag. She could see the devastating toll Eleanor's words took on Liam. He didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. He just absorbed the hit, taking the blame because some dark, guilty part of him believed he deserved it. "I am doing my best," Liam said. His voice was a low, defensive gravel. "Your best isn't working," Eleanor said coldly. She looked at her grandson, then back at Liam. "He needs warmth. He needs a real home. And if you refuse to realize that, Liam, I will have the courts realize it for you. The threat hung in the air, heavy and absolute. We are not doing this in front of him, Liam said. His voice was a low, dangerous rumble. He didn't wait for Eleanor's response. He placed a heavy hand on his mother-in-law's shoulder and guided her out the front door, stepping onto the porch and pulling the heavy door shut behind them. The house fell into a sudden, suffocating silence. Sarah let out a slow breath. She left her medical bag by the sofa and walked over to the kitchen island to sign the daily vitals log, just as Liam had ordered. As she picked up her pen, she noticed a small wooden tray near the edge of the counter where Liam kept his keys. Resting inside the tray was the other half of the yellow walkie-talkie set. Unlike Leo's, this one was perfectly intact, and the tiny green power light at the top was blinking. It was turned on. Sarah stared at it. A soft, rhythmic hiss of static drifted from the small speaker. She glanced over her shoulder. In the living room, Leo was curled up on the leather chair. He had pulled his broken radio out of his jacket pocket and was pressing it tightly to his mouth, hiding his face behind his knees. Sarah slowly picked up the intact radio from the tray and brought it close to her ear. "Are you still mad, Daddy?" The whisper was so fragile it barely registered above the static. Sarah froze, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Grandma is yelling," Leo whispered into his plastic toy. "I'm sorry. I'm trying to be good." Sarah gripped the edge of the granite counter. She couldn't speak. She couldn't even breathe. "Mommy went away," the tiny voice continued, trembling with an impossible weight. "And then I cried. And when I cried, your eyes got red. You stopped smiling. I hurt you, Daddy." A tear slipped down Sarah's cheek, dropping silently onto the medical logbook. "I promise I won't cry anymore," Leo whispered into the silence. "I won't talk. I'll be perfectly quiet. Just please don't be sad. Please don't go away too. Over and out." The static returned. Sarah stood completely paralyzed in the sterile kitchen. The truth hit her with devastating force. Leo wasn't suffering from trauma-induced mutism. He wasn't broken. He was a 6-year-old boy trying to be a human shield for his father. He believed his grief was destroying the only parent he had left, so he had locked it all inside. They were two people desperate to protect each other, completely destroying themselves in the process. Sarah didn't get the chance to tell Liam what she had heard. Before she could process the devastating weight of Leo's secret, the heavy front door opened. Liam stepped back into the foyer, his face pale and his jaw set in stone. Eleanor was gone, but the damage she left in her wake was absolute. Liam didn't look at Sarah. He walked straight past her, picked up Leo from the chair, and carried him upstairs without a single word. The invisible fortress had been rebuilt, thicker and taller than before. The real strike came 48 hours later. Sarah was at the community clinic, organizing patient files at the front desk, when the heavy glass door swung open. Liam marched in. He wasn't in uniform today, but the sheer force of his presence made the small waiting room feel dangerously confined. He didn't say hello. He walked directly to the counter and slammed a thick manila folder onto the surface. "Is this how you operate, Nurse Jenkins?" Liam asked. His voice was a lethal, quiet rasp. Sarah looked down at the documents. It was a copy of an emergency custody petition filed by Eleanor in family court. Highlighted in bright yellow on the second page were Sarah's exact clinical notes. Patient exhibits profound stress response. The home environment lacks emotional warmth. Father's strict enforcement of discipline appears to be exacerbating the child's emotional withdrawal. Sarah's heart plummeted into her stomach. "Captain Carter, I didn't give this to her. The logbook was on your kitchen counter. She must have photographed it while you were distracted by the siren. But you wrote it," Liam said. His eyes burned with an agonizing mixture of betrayal and exhaustion. "You came into my home. You earned my son's trust. And then you documented that I am destroying him." "Those are standard clinical observations," Sarah pleaded, keeping her voice low. "I have to log what I see. But I didn't know she was going to weaponize my notes against you. Liam, you have to believe me. I know why Leo isn't speaking." Liam held up a hand, cutting her off completely. The vulnerability he had shown on the floor with his son was entirely gone. He looked at her not as a lifeline, but as a threat. "Because of your notes, I have a mediation hearing on Friday to prove I have the right to keep my own son," Liam said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Do not come back to my house." End quote. They turned and walked out the door, taking all the air in the room with him. The clinic director's office felt suffocatingly small. "I'm sorry, Sarah," Dr. Evans said, sliding a formal reassignment paper across his desk. "But Mrs. Vance has officially subpoenaed our clinic's records for her emergency custody petition. We cannot have our staff actively embedded in a household during a contentious family court dispute. It's a massive legal liability." "He's not a danger to his son," Sarah pleaded, her voice tight. "He is just grieving. If you pull me out now, Leo is going to think another person he trusted has abandoned him." "You are off the Carter case, Sarah. Effective immediately. You are only authorized to drop off his discharge paperwork." The finality of the order felt like a physical blow. An hour later, Sarah drove to the quiet suburban house one last time. She walked up the front steps, her chest tight with an overwhelming sense of loss. When Liam opened the heavy wooden door, he looked entirely hollowed out. The rigid military posture was still there, keeping him upright, but the dark circles under his eyes betrayed the crushing toll of the last 48 hours. He didn't step aside. He didn't invite her in. "I have to leave, Captain," Sarah said softly. She held out a thick manila envelope. "The clinic officially removed me from your rotation. This is the final sign-off." Liam stared at the envelope, his jaw flexed. For a fraction of a second, Sarah saw the sheer panic of a drowning man flash in his dark eyes, the quiet, terrifying realization that his fortress was now completely empty. But true to his nature, he swallowed the fear and nodded stiffly. "Understood," Liam said, his voice completely devoid of emotion. He took the envelope from her hands. "Liam, please listen to me," she whispered, risking her professional boundaries one last time. "The official vitals log they took doesn't tell the whole story. I left my personal observation journal inside that envelope. Please, just read it before the mediation tomorrow." Liam didn't answer. He didn't even look at the envelope. He simply stepped back and closed the heavy wooden door, shutting her out of their world completely. Sarah stood on the cold porch for a long time, listening to the profound silence of the house, terrified that it was the sound of a family breaking apart for good. The family court mediation room smelled of stale coffee and polished wood. Eleanor sat across the long mahogany table, her lawyer methodically listing every reason why the Carter household was an unfit environment for a grieving child. The mediator, a weary-looking man in a gray suit, took careful notes. Liam sat perfectly still on his side of the table. He wore his service dress uniform, the brass buttons and heavy fabric acting as the final shield he had left. But beneath the decorated exterior, he was entirely hollow. He wasn't listening to the lawyer. His eyes were locked on the thick manila envelope resting on the table in front of him. "Just read it before the mediation tomorrow." Sarah's parting words echoed in his mind. As Eleanor's lawyer began quoting the clinical vitals log, Liam slowly slid his thumb under the flap of the envelope. He pulled out a small, worn leather notebook. It wasn't official clinic stationery. It was Sarah's personal journal. He opened it to the dog-eared page. The handwriting was neat, but hurried. It didn't contain cold medical data. It contained the exact transcription of a whisper heard over a broken yellow walkie-talkie. "Mommy went away, and then I cried. And when I cried, your eyes got red. You stopped smiling. I hurt you, Daddy. I promise I won't cry anymore. I won't talk. I'll be perfectly quiet. Just please don't be sad." Beneath the quote, Sarah had written a single observation. "Liam, he isn't broken. He is trying to protect you. He thinks your grief is a reaction to his tears. He needs to know it is okay to be sad out loud. He needs his dad, not a commanding officer." The air completely left Liam's lungs. The words hit him with the force of a physical blow. The absolute certainty he had built his survival upon, that his strict control was keeping his son safe, shattered into 1,000 pieces. He hadn't been protecting Leo. He had been forcing a 6-year-old boy to carry the weight of a grown man's unexpressed agony. Sarah hadn't betrayed him. She had found the only key that could save them. "Captain Carter," the mediator said, leaning forward, "do you have a response to these allegations regarding the child's emotional withdrawal?" Liam closed the notebook. The rigid, defensive posture of the Navy SEAL melted away, leaving only a father who had finally woken up. He stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Yes," Liam said, his voice thick with a raw, unprotected emotion no one in the room had ever heard from him before. "But not to you." The mediator frowned, his pen hovering over his notepad. Captain Carter, this is a formal proceeding. Who exactly are you responding to? Liam didn't look at the mediator. He didn't look at Eleanor's lawyer. He simply reached into the breast pocket of his decorated dress blue uniform. His large, weathered hand emerged holding the intact yellow plastic walkie-talkie. Eleanor stared at the toy, bewildered. Liam, what are you doing? Liam ignored her. He flicked the small switch on the side of the radio. A tiny green light blinked to life, followed by a soft, rhythmic hiss of static that filled the quiet, mahogany-paneled room. He pressed the transmission button. Leo, Liam said. His voice cracked, stripped entirely of its military authority. It's Daddy. Do you copy? Outside, in the sterile hallway of the courthouse waiting area, Sarah was sitting on a wooden bench next to Leo. The boy was tracing the floor tiles with his sneakers, his broken radio clutched tightly in his lap. Suddenly, the plastic speaker crackled. Leo, it's Daddy. Do you copy? Leo gasped. His head snapped up, his wide, dark eyes locking onto Sarah. She smiled, tears blurring her vision, and gave him a gentle, encouraging nod. Back in the mediation room, Liam held the radio close to his mouth. His hands, which had remained perfectly steady through multiple combat deployments, were shaking. I read Nurse Sarah's notebook, buddy, Liam said, the tears finally breaking through his disciplined facade. I know what you said to her. I need you to listen to me very carefully. When Mommy went away, I was broken. I was so sad, but my eyes didn't get red because you cried. You never hurt me, Leo. You are the only thing holding me together. Eleanor covered her mouth with her trembling hand. The anger drained from her face, replaced by a sudden, devastating clarity. You don't have to be a shield for me. Liam whispered into the plastic toy, a single tear cutting down his cheek. You don't have to be quiet. I need your noise. I need your voice. I am so sorry I made you feel like you had to hide. The static hissed for 10 long seconds. Liam closed his eyes, terrified he was too late. Then, a small click sounded over the frequency. Daddy? The tiny, fragile voice echoed out of the radio, filling the mediation room. It was the first time Eleanor had heard her grandson speak in 8 months. I'm here, buddy, Liam choked out. Are you going to be sad out loud now? Leo asked. Yes, Liam said, wiping his face. We both can. We can do it together. Another pause. Then, the voice came through stronger this time, carrying the absolute forgiveness that only a child could offer. I love you, Daddy. Over and out. Liam lowered the radio. He looked across the table at Eleanor. She was openly weeping. The custody petition, completely forgotten. The war was over. The mediation ended 10 minutes later. Eleanor formally withdrew her emergency petition. Before leaving the courthouse, she pulled Liam into a fragile, tearful hug, an apology he returned with quiet forgiveness. The war was officially over. That evening, the suburban house felt entirely different. The sterile, cold atmosphere of the barracks was gone, replaced by a profound, breathing warmth. Sarah stood in the doorway of Leo's bedroom. The 6-year-old was fast asleep, his small chest rising and falling in a deep, peaceful rhythm. On his wooden nightstand, resting inside a small keepsake box, were the 2 halves of the yellow plastic walkie-talkie. They were both turned off. Leo didn't need a broken radio to cross the distance anymore. Sarah smiled softly, pulled the bedroom door half shut, and walked downstairs. She stepped out onto the front porch, pulling her sweater tighter against the cool evening air. Liam was standing by the wooden railing, looking out at the quiet street. He wasn't wearing his dress uniform. Dressed in a simple gray t-shirt and jeans, the rigid, impenetrable posture of the Navy SEAL had been completely replaced by the quiet, grounded exhaustion of a man who had finally laid his armor down. He turned as the screen door clicked shut. He's asleep, Sarah said softly, stepping up beside him. Thank you, Liam replied. He turned to face her, closing the distance between them. His movements were slow, deliberate, and entirely stripped of his usual military guard. Not just for today, Sarah. Thank you for not letting me push you away when I tried my absolute hardest to. Sarah looked up into his dark eyes. The defensive walls were completely gone. In their place was a deep, steady warmth. You were just trying to protect him. I was, Liam said, his voice dropping to a rough, honest whisper. But I realized today that I want to build a home, not a fortress. And I don't want to build it alone. He reached out. His large, weathered hand gently brushed a stray lock of hair behind her ear. His thumb traced the line of her jaw. It was the first time he had truly touched her, and the sheer protective tenderness of the gesture made her breath catch. "The clinic officially took you off my medical rotation," Liam murmured, a small, genuine smile finally breaking across his weathered face. "They did," Sarah whispered, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Good," Liam said softly, stepping close enough that she could feel the steady, calm heat of his chest. "Because I don't want a nurse, Sarah. But we do need you. I need you." He didn't issue an order. He didn't demand an answer. He just waited, offering her the vulnerability he had hidden from the rest of the world. Sarah smiled, leaning her cheek into the warmth of his heavy hand. "I'm not going anywhere, Liam." Liam let out a quiet, trembling breath of relief. He leaned down and kissed her. It wasn't a sudden, desperate collision, but a slow, deeply earned promise. In the quiet stillness of the porch, a decorated soldier and a compassionate nurse finally stopped fighting the past, choosing instead to become the family they were always meant to be.